What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I'm your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously, both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. Guys, real quick before we begin, I have created a brand new accelerator program. It kicks off in mid-May and has an in-person welcome event starting on the 1st of June. I've put a ton of work into building this course, and it's important to point out that this is not a novice level program. It's for people who own property and want to be involved in the property business. It's aimed at time-poor business owners, corporate executives and professionals who might harbour ambitions to build their own property portfolio with the potential to fully replace their salary. Now, you may not want to leave your job, or you may not want to give it up or anything like that, but I think you will see the value of having options beyond selling your time for money. If this sounds of interest, please click the link below to book a call with me to discuss whether or not you're a right fit for the program. I do look forward to meeting you in June if you are, and working closely with you on this exciting journey. Now, back to the show. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. And today I am going to go unscripted and see how I do with just a talk that is really something that I've been talking about with my mastermind clients in the last couple of days. And it's what got me thinking about talking about this topic today was I have been messing around with the latest version of ChatGPT. And for those of you who are familiar with this, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you're not paying attention, this is something that is really, really coming on in leaps and bounds. And what you can do now with ChatGPT, and it's something that I've been experimenting with, but you have this new interface where you don't have to type any longer. You can just talk with your phone or with your system, and it answers in extremely realistic voice. It even has, the computer voice will actually go and things like that. It actually it has mannerisms like it's human. Very, very interesting to play around with it, and it makes it far more useful in some respects because this is not GPT-4. This is GPT-4 Turbo. And it's got all of these extra features, which is really fascinating. You can now take a photograph and you can ask it what is in the photograph, and is there anything I should know, or is there anything I should be doing? And I saw an experiment that somebody did on LinkedIn there during the week, and they took a photograph of an air conditioning unit, and they had opened it up and they had taken out the filter or something along that line. And they took a photograph and they asked ChatGPT, what is this? And is there anything I need to know? And without any prompting other than that, it came back by saying that this was an air conditioning unit, that the door of the filter cabinet was open. And then it went on to point out that there was noticeable rust specks on this, and that indicates such and such a thing about, the maintenance or whatever. My mind was absolutely blown. So I've been experimenting with this myself, and it's just there's no photograph that I have uploaded yet that gives it difficulty, which is kind of amazing. And so the thing is just moving so quickly. And so now when you're talking to ChatGPT, you can ask it to produce an image. And I did this. I posted yesterday in LinkedIn, and I was thinking, what image should I use? And then I just explained to ChatGPT that I'm posting about a certain topic. What image would you suggest? And it produces an image, and I just said, that's fine, I'll take that, put it in. So it's starting to make life really, really quick. And I'm not talking about artificial intelligence for much longer. Really, the point that I'm making is that it's very unusual that we have these incredible advances coming along in society, like through technology. And yet we seem to be held back by just these kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just old style thinking and inertia in the in areas of government. So we have a massive housing crisis. There's no question about that. It's all in the papers this week, talking about everything. And I was speaking with my architect on a project that I'm doing at the moment, and we were talking about AI and how this is going to change design work and all that. And he said, "Well, hold on a second." He said he is currently waiting on a letter from Irish Water. And he's waiting on it for a week now or something like that. And he has 2 housing projects for 2 different clients sitting on his desk waiting to be submitted. But the only thing that they don't have is the letter from Irish Water. And he said that one of these schemes, because it involves a protected structure, that you need to submit 10 copies instead of the usual. I think the usual might be 4 copies or something like that. In this particular case, you have to have 10 copies because it has to go off to the Heritage Society and all these kind of things. But we were talking about, isn't it crazy that in this day and age that we have a housing crisis, and yet the planning system is one of the bottlenecks that's causing it. And yet, whilst we're talking about that, you still have to go in and you have to physically hand deliver a planning application in paper in 10 copies in order for it to be accepted by the planning department, certainly the planning department here in Dublin. And it just seems absolutely ridiculous. Now, I was saying, like, surely you're able to just submit it online or something like that. And he's saying, no, the only type of project they will accept for an online application is for essentially a domestic extension. Everything else of a certain size requires it to be submitted in paper. And so you think about the knock-on impact of that. So you've got people that are wanting to submit a project. They have to print it all off, first of all on paper, which is environmentally not very sound. And second of all, you have to make 10 copies of it instead of it just being a PDF submission. And then that can go and get copied by as many departments as that want it. It just seems to me that the system is creaking under the current system. The system is just creaking by lack of investment, or perhaps not lack of investment, but just a lack of a willingness to actually move forward. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would suspect that unions are probably in the middle of all this. And if you were to introduce online, that would involve all sorts of, renegotiation of contracts and things like that. Now, I could be wrong, but that is my sort of sneaking suspicion. And let's get into the housing market. Like, the housing market this week has been just one story after another. And it takes a lot of, I'm noticing more and more and more of these articles all pointing out just how much of a problem we have on our hands in this country. And one of the articles that I found in the last few days was, it was actually kind of a small article, but it was based on this commission, this housing commission report that was issued. And it says Ireland may need a lot more homes than previously thought. This is in the Irish Times. And it says Ireland could need as many as 80,000 new homes per year for the next 25 years, according to the Housing Commission, the Business Post reported. Now, this was in the Irish Times, but the Irish Times was reporting on it. The Commission submitted its study to Minister for Housing, Darragh O'Brien, last week. And then, now there was this was based on, the housing requirement was based on certain population sort of statistics that they're using. But the current population spike that we've been going through, and I think I've already talked about this on a recent enough podcast, we were saying that the migration stats for the country, 140,000 people came into the country in the year 2023. And of them, at least like about 70,000 of them were refugees. We're all well aware of that. But there's another 70,000 increase there. And I think certain amount of that was made up of workers. And that's actually, I'm not completely accurate. As far as I can remember, it was a total of 140,000 growth in the population. And of that, a certain amount of it was births, a certain amount of it was immigration for jobs, and a certain amount of it was refugees. But it resulted in something like 90,000 additional homes needed out of the 140,000, because obviously a certain number of people die as well, and so the numbers fluctuate between the inbound and the outbound. Anyway, 80,000 a year for the next 25 years. Just imagine, think about what that looks like. We're currently at about 33,000. So do the maths on that. Like that works out that we're currently producing, like I'm assuming that that's in the region of 40% of what we should be. But let me just run the numbers. Yeah, 41% of where we need to be. And so this year we're 60% off where we need to be. Next year we'll be 60% off where we need to be. The year after that, and also we have all of the backlog for prior years. And so it's no wonder then that in the Irish Times this week they're saying that house price inflation has begun accelerating again. And this is now the seventh. Let me see. It's saying that the house price inflation is now over 7%. And the latest residential property price index from the CSO, the Central Statistics Office, indicates that prices rose at an average of 7.3% in the 12 months to March. Now that's up from last month when I reported on this, and it was 6.2, which was another headline grabber, that it was growing at 6. Now it's growing at 7. And it goes on and talks about this. But what's interesting about all of this, I mean, it points out the average prices everywhere and all this kind of stuff. And it makes for an interesting read. But you can see, I can't see this demand issue that we have, this supply-demand tension. I cannot see it being overcome by anything. I think we're just going to have, as part of our news cycle, we're just going to have housing shortages for the next decade, for the next 20 years, whatever it might be. Now, I'm looking at another headline that I picked up during the week, and this was that rent increases likely to accelerate as the supply of new homes dries up, according to Daft. And the subtitle is "Supply of new units helped to ease inflation, but the trend is likely to turn," according to experts. More than 125 purpose-built rental developments have opened since 2016. That is large-scale kind of apartment schemes and stuff. But it says that 2.5%, the average rent in Dublin, where demand is highest, hit 2,395 per month in the first quarter. That is up 2.5% on the same period in 2023. Now, meanwhile, we have these rent pressure zones. And the rent pressure zones are trying to kind of keep a lid on all this kind of stuff. But it's very ineffective, because what it does is it means that people that are in a property, those guys are, I experienced this myself. Before I bought this home that I am now sitting in, I was renting, and the homes that we built were actually quite delayed by COVID and all that kind of stuff. We would have been in probably a year or two earlier had COVID not happened. But what actually happened was I was renting from a very nice landlord, and we moved in 2017, just after the birth of my daughter, and we were paying $2,250 per month for just a house in Blackrock, and she never once increased the rent for the 7 years that we were living there. And very fortunate. It was nice of her just to do that. She just never increased, never even suggested it. And whilst I was the beneficiary of that, the reality is that she could have increased the rent by 2% per year over that period of time. And if she had done that, she would have moved up along, it wouldn't be catching up with inflation, but it would at least move up with the rent pressure zone allowances that you're allowed to kind of do. But what it means now is that when she puts that house on the market for sale, or if she just decides to rent it again, she cannot go above the 2% from what it was last rented at. And so that means that the house now is probably a good deal below the market rent that it should be. If she had increased 2% every year for the 7 years, you're looking at least 14%. Like, probably with compound interest, you're probably looking at closer to 18%. And so the rents would be 18% higher. Do the maths on 18%, you're talking about an additional 300-400. Let me see, 300. You're talking about close to 400-500 extra per month of rent had she done that. And that now is going to be the problem for the next owner. So what does it mean? If you want to increase the rent on that property, you have got a couple of options open to you. You're entitled to keep the property empty for 2 years in order to basically break out of the rent pressure zone cap, or you can increase the energy rating of the property. And I think if it increases by 7 points, which is a substantial investment, then you're entitled to increase. So if you were, say, a D-rated property and you went from D through C3, C2, C1, B2, B3, B2, B1, and then you got that basically would be 5 or 6 points. And so A3 would be the next point. Only then would you be able to increase your rent to kind of the market share. And so you can see how this makes it quite unattractive to investors. And what it does is it means that people that are in housing are doing fine. People who are looking for housing are not doing so good. And most of the people that are out there buying property are buying it as new, they want to own a property. They don't want to necessarily rent it out. It's for themselves. Anyway, we were talking about all of this, and then during the week, the Housing Commission came out and had basically said that Ireland is very ineffective and reactive on housing. And they pointed out that the rent pressure zones are not working as a system and that they should be replaced. And I mean, it goes on and on. I'm not going to dwell on this, but really you can see how, given the demand issues that we have and given the constraint on supplies, we're in a situation where the price of houses can only go in one direction, really. I know a lot of people would like to think that there's another crash coming and stuff like that, but it will not be caused by a lack of demand. Back in 2008, the crash was caused by the fact that nobody actually needed these properties. There was an oversupply, and the only reason that the prices had been rising was because of speculation. You could go and borrow money easily from the banks. They didn't put you through all these kind of tests and checking your income and all that. They really just said, do you want to borrow money? No problem, here you go. And fast forward to a couple of years later, and the whole thing came crashing down. Today, it's a completely different situation. First of all, getting a mortgage is highly regulated. The central bank is all over it. They have all sorts of limits on what you can borrow and things like that. So there is order in the system, and because of that, there won't be a crash certainly as a result of reckless lending. The next thing that's not going to be, there's going to be no catch up in supply. I cannot see a situation where you will have suddenly oversupply in the market, because how would it be created? We need 80,000 according to this report. I've seen other reports that say we need 60,000. One way or another, we're short by about 50%. As much as 60% according to the latest findings. How do you do that? Like, it's not like the construction industry is currently at a kind of a low point and that they don't have any work on. These guys are all flat out. You try and get anything done these days, everybody is flat out. Everybody has, a full book of inquiries, a full book of, pipeline of work and stuff like that. So where is all of this capacity to build an extra 50,000 houses a year? Where's that going to come from? If we decide to kind of reach out to our partner or European partners and say we'd like to make it very, very attractive for all of these Eastern European labourers to come over and work in the Irish market and help us build, that's all fine. But where will they stay? We already have massive shortage of housing. So where are these people going to actually come in and stay if they get here? So you can see how this is a problem. Now, we talked about this on my mastermind yesterday. And we were talking about this exact thing. We were saying, like, what exactly could be the problem that causes the market to crash? And this is where you get a couple of different insights from different people. Certainly, we don't think we're heading for a situation where the market could crash because of reckless lending as it did before. But there were a couple of views that what's happening at the moment in the market is that affordability is a major, major issue. And whereas there's massive demand, and there is incredibly sort of constrained supply, we'll say. We need 80,000. We're only building 33,000 or thereabouts. So we're 60% short on where we need to be. And having said that, if you go out there and try to buy a property, like a new person, a young person trying to buy a property, they are pretty close to maxed out in terms of what they can afford. And so the prices of the properties that are up for sale are at the upper end of what young people can afford, save getting a big pay rise or something like that. So that's one issue. And yet, if you have a look at on the construction side of things, for somebody going out, buying a plot of land and looking to build houses on it, the system is currently, it's so constrained that the prices are where they are, that it's actually still hard to make the economic stack on a lot of deals. Back in 2022, when interest rates were much, much lower, it was easier to make things stack then. And a lot of the big apartment schemes that we had coming out, they made sense because you had big pension funds and things like that stepping in and buying. And they were buying at very, very high valuations. That's gone away now. And so this is maybe a weakness insofar as there's going to get to a point where it's not so much that there's going to be a crash, but that simply projects will not be financeable anymore. That at some point, young people are simply going to say, look, I can't afford this any longer. Or they'll just have to go further and further out. Instead of buying in 50 kilometers in the commuter belt, 50 kilometers from Dublin, maybe they start going out to 60 and 70. There's a guy working at my office who lives on the Cavan border. And so he lives in Cavan on the border with, to the north. And so he has something like a 2-hour drive every day to do. And when you see that, you realize that this is, that there's a whole thing around quality of life, obviously, but affordability is a big, big issue. But if the central bank was to come along and say, okay, guys, rather than having, a cap on your earnings and you can't borrow any more than 3 or 4 times your earnings, we're going to allow it to increase to 6 times your earnings. What would happen then? Would suddenly the whole market suddenly be awash with money? No, what happened is prices would rise to that point where there's no longer any capacity for the people to afford to make the payments, and then it would stop again. And we'll be back where we started. And so it's a very, very challenging situation. I think we're going to be dealing with a housing shortage for decades. And it's kind of, when you say that, you can say, no, they'll have to do something to fix it. How are they going to fix it? Unless, modular construction comes in and they're able to do huge estates without needing very many laborers, and it can all be done by machines or something like that. That's kind of far-fetched to me. I don't think that's on the cards. And so I think we're into a situation where, notwithstanding what all the politicians will be saying at the next election that will come up, they'll all be saying, oh, we're going to be the ones that'll fix this. Nobody's going to fix it. I think we're in for a really, really difficult time, because what's happening is the government is trying to push away the investors from buying up and pushing up prices. So they're making it more difficult, and they're increasing taxes, and they're doing all these things to try to kind of prevent it. But that is just going to make things probably worse. And I can't see this thing getting any better. So does that bode well for investors, property investors? In a sense it does, because at least it means that prices are in some way protected. But I'm just not sure that it's good insofar as the long-term outcome, if taxes are going to be increased and stuff like that. it's difficult to see where it's all going to go. So guys, on this slightly dour note, I'll leave it at that, and hope you have a good week, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you enjoyed the show or found it in any way useful, could I please ask you to take a moment to leave a review over on iTunes or Spotify. This really helps us get the podcast out in front of more people. If you have any questions or topics you would like me to cover in future episodes, please connect with me via my brand new school community. You will find a link in the show notes. You can stay up to date with all of my content and the projects I'm working on by signing up for my weekly newsletter over on my website, gavinjgallagher.com. That's all for now. See you back here, same time next week.